Today, we are diving into a really intense document. It's a formal memorandum written by a university professor, and in it, he alleges systemic corruption, transnational theft, and a complete and utter breakdown of the court system he was supposed to trust.
Wow. Right from the jump, the author hits you with this line in his introduction. You can tell immediately he's not just filing some dry legal complaint. He's framing this as a story of profound betrayal, where the one institution meant to protect people has become, in his own words, a den of plunder. That one phrase really tells you everything you need to know about the gravity of what we're about to unpack.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to get a handle on the document itself and its author. Then we'll identify the whole network of people he's accusing. After that, we'll dig into the specific allegations of plunder, look at his claims of systemic failure, see what he's formally demanding, and then wrap up with the document's powerful final word.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, just understanding what this document is and who's behind it.
So, what are we actually looking at here? Well, this isn't just some angry letter. It's a formal memorandum. It's written by Dr. Mohammed Abraham Fayad, who makes sure to identify himself as a software engineering professor and a U.S. citizen. And the core of it, really, is this series of incredibly serious allegations against the California family court system.
You know, the goal here is pretty explicit. Dr. Fayad says he's literally creating a map to show everyone exactly how a system he once believed in turned into what he calls a nightmare. So he's not just listing things that went wrong, he's charting out what he sees as a deliberate path of corruption.
Okay, so moving on to our second section, this is where it starts to build. See, the memorandum doesn't just point a finger at one person. It lays out what the author describes as an entire network of people who are complicit.
And check out the language he uses. It is so deliberate and incredibly charged. He splits the people he's accusing into two main groups: the judicial tyrants, those are the court officials, and the vipers, which is the term he uses for his ex-wife and her legal team.
First up, the judicial tyrants. The document specifically calls out Judge James E. Towery. He's accused of bias, sure, but also, and this is critical, of completely ignoring a final divorce ruling from an Egyptian court. The memorandum goes on to claim that the wider Santa Clara family court basically enabled what the author calls double dipping, and we'll unpack exactly what that means in a minute.
Then you have the second group, the vipers. This is a much wider network. At the center of it all is the author's ex-wife, Rafea El-Mehelemi. But the document claims she was hardly acting alone. It points to a whole web of lawyers in both the US and Egypt, a major bank that allegedly helped with fraud, and even a paralegal who he says was collaborating against him.
Okay, this brings us right to the money, literally. Section 3 gets into the nitty-gritty of what the author calls plunder.
So the document basically lays out this four-step process of looting. It starts, he says, with a transnational robbery of real estate. Then it moves to the plundering of his savings and gold, then the seizure of his personal property, and the whole time he claims it was all happening under a corrupt judicial cover. And when you look at the details, the scale of what he's alleging is just staggering. We are not just talking about disputed bank accounts here. The document calls it a cross-border heist. He's talking about apartments in Egypt, huge amounts of gold and cash, and even something as personal as his car keys, which he claims was a deliberate act to make it impossible for him to get around. So you can see, this is the crucial point for him. It's not just about the money. This quote really captures his perspective, that the whole point was to do more than just take his assets. It was to completely erase his financial security and what he calls his personal history.
All right, so let's zoom out a bit. In Section 4, the document really pivots from what happened to me to what's wrong with the entire system. It goes from a personal grievance to a full-blown institutional critique.
Okay, this right here is probably the most important legal argument he makes. He claims that his divorce was finalized in Egypt back in 2018. His ex-wife got her full legal dues there. But then, he says, the California court just ignored that ruling and let her also claim community property in the U.S. He calls it double dipping. It's like, imagine you settle a debt in one place and then you go somewhere else and they make you pay it all over again. That's essentially what he's arguing happened here.
And that core idea of double rights just snowballs into this massive critique of the whole system. First, there's the litigation duplicity. Then he alleges the court just flat out dismissed evidence of forged bank signatures. On top of that, he claims there was institutional racism, brutal discrimination, he calls it, against naturalized citizens like him. And what's the end result of all this? A complete and profound loss of trust in the very system that's supposed to protect you.
And the consequences he describes are just absolutely devastating.
Dr. Fayad writes that this whole ordeal has led to his total professional, research, academic, and commercial ruin. But even more heartbreaking, he says it has resulted in the complete loss of his children. He notes he hasn't even seen his son in over 8 years. So, with claims this serious, you have to ask, what does he actually want? What's the end game here? That brings us to Section 5, his formal call to action.
And let me tell you, his demands are just as big as his allegations. He's not asking for a simple apology. He wants all the U.S. court judgments annulled. He wants full restitution of the money, compensation for damages. But then he goes even further, demanding a comprehensive cleaning of the entire judicial system and an international investigation into the judge's conduct.
And he wasn't quiet about it either. To make sure he was heard, he sent this memorandum to over 80 different people and organizations.
I mean, just look at this distribution list. It's not random. He's sending this to everyone from the governor of California and the U.S. Department of Justice to human rights groups, members of Congress, his own university, and even the banks he's accusing. He's clearly trying to create pressure from every possible angle.
All right, let's wrap this up. Section 6 covers the document's final words and how the author chooses to leave things.
You know, he doesn't just end with accusations. In his conclusion, he makes it really clear. He says he has the receipts. He states that he is fully prepared to provide the evidence, specifically citing forged bank documents and those official Egyptian court rulings to prove every single one of his claims.
So, when you boil it all down, this entire document is a map of one man's journey from having faith in the system to accusing it of his complete and total ruin. And while the memorandum itself doesn't provide the answers, it leaves us with a pretty huge question to think about. How should a system respond when it's accused of becoming the very thing it was built to prevent?